Everyone, Shima, thank you.
Thank you. Well, I'm delighted to be here, but you got the health warning with the last talk, Carrie saying she didn't have any GIFs, but she had a video. I have no GIFs and no video. So now I'm a little bit worried. But then, I'm thinking, I'm a construction engineer. I did my time, big civil works, stuff doesn't move. In fact, I didn't do very well in my dynamics class, which is why I picked a construction degree instead of designing cars, which I initially thought I'd do. Moving stuff, I don't get. So my presentation is static as well. Actually, I think all the talks you've heard this morning are a great setting for mine. So I'll pick up on a theme, but I'm taking you kind of out of the tech focus. I said, okay, well, what can you actually do with computer science, your tech, as a woman, whether you want to continue coding or not? Entrepreneurship might have the answer. And hopefully it will click.
Left click.
I might not like videos, but I'm not that technology challenged, but here we go. So I thought one of the things to put in front of you are these characteristics of an entrepreneur that the media and people talk about, because of course at the moment it's a great idea to be an entrepreneur. Culture is moving you towards that, but you watch things like Dragon's Den and it's a kind of really scary bit. But what it takes is that. Do you take a moment to read that list and see how that resonates with you? Who feels that that describes them? Exactly. That is the stereotypical entrepreneur. But in fact, it rarely fits anybody other than probably Richard Branson. But somehow he isn't kind of divorced and lost his house in the bargain as well. So maybe he just did it a little bit better. But that doesn't really resonate with anyone. And there is a problem with the stereotype. We've elevated a certain notion of masculinity that doesn't fit with your average man and certainly does not fit with your average woman. But still, at this point, I'd like to say, let's kind of also not think of woman as a thing. There's more diversity between women than there is between the average woman and the average man. But still, kind of moving on to that kind of, okay, even within all that diversity, it doesn't fit us, and therefore we start to reject the label, reject the notions, and it starts to impact the sorts of things we access as well. So you label it entrepreneur, and you've almost immediately alienated women. So there's a big EU project that worked with women entrepreneurs, and almost all of them went, I'm not an entrepreneur, I'm just a business owner. So the language we use and the impressions we have really make an impact. But women and women's entrepreneurs are really a significant force in this world. So the first box is the stats developed for the UK. And saying for the UK alone, if women were to achieve their entrepreneurial ambition, so this was a research done asking women, do you want to be an entrepreneur? And if you are, what sort of growth ambitions do you have? They would contribute 5 billion to the economy and almost 250,000 jobs. That is not insignificant. I extrapolated the second two boxes, knowing, well, if you're going to look across Europe or across the world, you're talking billions and billions to national income, to family income, and millions of jobs. So ignoring women is not a good idea. Encouraging women to come into it is really important. So, if this is something you're willing to consider, please do. Now, this is a map created by one of my colleagues about the companies that were created around and from Cambridge University. This was the research done prior to 2005, published in 2005. How many women founders do you think? Oh, sorry, this is the IT, this, the tech map. There is a biotech map, but this is just the tech map. Everybody that's kind of high-tech and computer-related. How many women founders do you think are on this map? Any guesses? Zero. There are no women. So they did a follow-up research, and they put in some of the picked up some of the companies they missed the first time and some of the newer companies. How many do you think are on it now? Any guesses? Almost. Good guess. 3. So it's pretty dismal. And so this essentially is the problem. I mean, it seems to be quite bad in and around Cambridge at the moment, but it could be a time factor. We hope it's a time factor because we definitely see big differences within the classroom, in gender, and ethnic diversity. So we're hoping that as these groups graduate and mature, we'll see that diffusing across the cluster. But still, we have less than half, or about half, of women in STEM that choose entrepreneurship, choose to set up businesses, choose to lead them. So if nothing else, there's all that scope to double the women of STEM entrepreneurs, and that's not even addressing the agenda of getting more women through the STEM subjects. But just with working with what we've got the potential to double the number of women. But this is at the heart of the problem. So women are significantly less likely to perceive themselves as able to be an entrepreneur, and they hold themselves to stricter standards. That is a big problem. And this is the flip side of it. In the absence of any evidence, the men still perceive themselves as having more ability relative to their woman partners. So this whole thing about self-perception, self-belief, and confidence is something to work with. And I'll keep that in mind. I'll pick up on this theme in a minute. So this really is it. Now, again, I showed this to a group of women, and one of them went, "Oh, are you trying to tell us you think you're a lion, but you're only a pussycat?" I thought, no. I'm actually trying to say exactly the opposite. The importance here, whereas you all thought, oh, well, are the men really that conceited? On some level, the men have it right. This is the important thing. If you can look in that mirror and see that lion, that's where we're aiming to be. There is something about confidence. In fact, there was a paper that was written last year was about how confidence can compensate for competence. And there is something there, because you put yourself forward. When you're confident, you set more challenging and ambitious goals and targets. When you trip over something, you pick yourself up because you have that confidence. You know I can do it. It's not as if you say, oh, well, I knew all along, I can't really do that. So there is something about confidence, about the goal setting, the resilience, even that kind of impetus to take that first step. So please, I'll do the same thing. If there is one thing you take away from this talk, try and see that lion. Find that inner lion. And that goes for men and women. So, first message is, know yourself and be your best self. My son gets sent home with a little card about the rules of school and things, and it is this 6 or 7 points about being your best self. Play to your strengths. You don't have to do everything, and you don't have to be average. I love the little anti-imposter syndrome diagram. Find your circle. What are you good at? You don't have to be the big circle. You need to know your circle and play to your strengths. And then attract the other circles to you. Play to other people's strengths. If you focus on your and other people's strengths, then collectively, you're actually quite a force to be reckoned with. Now, these are some characteristics of women-led businesses. Majority ends up being in healthcare, education, insurance, some cottage industries. You see a little bit of a trend in this. And actually was mentioned a little bit earlier as well. Women seem to have that caring thing going. So it's going to be something that matters. And these are some of their characteristics as well. Most are married, have children, they might have elderly parents. And yet you hear all the time, oh, well, women don't start businesses. It's all the baby thing. And it's all the same reason why we don't get to top management as well, because we have babies. So how can we possibly cope? But actually, the majority of women entrepreneurs have kids, have dual responsibilities, sometimes triple, and actually a lot of the times they have a job as well. So that isn't really a hindrance. Now, part of what gets also told is, well, women are risk averse. So you tend to choose smaller businesses, you don't particularly want to grow, and oh, you don't borrow money or you don't take equity finance. And that's quite a big one. So I've had a woman once, well, recently rather than once, because it happens more than once, go, how can I possibly take investment if I'm not quite sure this is going to work? It's like gambling with other people's money. And yes, it is in some ways. But people who are in this game know the rules of the game. So when someone pitches to the Dragon's Den, it might sound like it's a done deal, but both parties know there's actually stuff to be worked out, and it might not work, and if it doesn't work, all parties will lose their money. On the other hand, I have some mixed groups where the men will go, well, I'm not putting my money behind that. I don't know if it's going to work. How can I access other people's money? And you can see a little bit of that thing. So this idea of being risk-averse and ethical does play into it, and the fact that women are very focused. So it's likely to be a niche industry. It solves a particular problem. It's very market-oriented. And I put them here in blue. I used to have this slide with that in red, because actually those three things are criticisms of women entrepreneurs. And yet, I don't know how you see them, but that to me, particularly in light of the recent financial crises and so on, that seems to me pretty good sound business principle. You're focused, you're market-oriented, you're solving a need, you're making a difference, you're being careful with how you access and use money. How is that a bad thing? But apparently it is. So the thing is, though, people are moving towards this, and there is a small but gaining kind of movement that says, yeah, actually the way women are setting up and running businesses might be something we should look at. Maybe they've actually got onto something with their business models. The one thing that I have to say with the being risk-averse and accessing money, if you're in a business where you need to move quickly, then not accessing the sufficient amounts of money can actually hinder you, because you're not getting in quick enough solving the problem someone else comes in. And the other thing is, when you remain small and you're only one person, if you are sick, or you need to take maternity leave, or you want to take a holiday, then suddenly you're not earning at all. And that is a problem not only for you, but for your customers. Because when you're not there, your customers don't get their service, they don't get their product, and therefore they move on to someone else, or their business is hindered. So actually creating a business that's sizable enough that it's self-sustainable if you are not directly involved has its advantages. So kind of try and think moving beyond the, well, it maintains my lifestyle, I can do it as a one-man show. These are some businesses set up by women or predominantly women. And I thought the one you might be particularly interested in is data giving. Because data giving is, well, an app, a glorified app, but it was motivated entirely by wanting to make visible what we give to charities. So we can, you get asked, we all give to charities one way or another, but we don't really have an appreciation of the impact. And data given was kind of coded by a woman at Cambridge to work with the charities, businesses, and individuals that tells you where every pound you spend with a different charity goes. So it's online, have a look if you need to use it. The top one is another one that's quite interesting as well. It's not computer science, but it's about making a difference in the ways you can without it being big and flashy and expensive. And they realized that lots of babies die in developing countries because, when they're premature, because they don't have all the the machines and the incubators that you need for a non-preterm baby, so however premature they're born. And within that one of the biggest factors for mortality was actually babies not being able to regulate their body temperatures. So they came up with this little pack. They found a material that helps regulate temperature, and now that's quite a cheap mobile incubator that they use around Africa. So the second message is make a difference. Find that niche. Play to your strengths, make a difference. And my God, are we facing a lot of problems. Whatever your strength is, whatever your inclination is, whatever you think is fun, there's a problem that you can probably solve. Find your problem, find your niche, and solve it. I thought we'd probably stop with that going, okay, if you're going to solve an existing problem that's not and we're hobbling, then you're in that area of innovation. Are you going to innovate? And yet again, here I'd like to bust a myth. Everybody thinks if you're going to make a difference, you're going to have that breakthrough innovation. You're going to do something that nobody's doing in a way that nobody's done it ever before. You might. Not dissing breakthrough innovations, but actually not necessarily, and most innovations are not breakthrough. Most are in the other three. So the next step down from that is a platform innovation, that you've actually created a technology or a space to allow others to do things in a way that wasn't possible before. Or you can be a derivative. So the Apple products are a great example of that. They all pretty much do the same thing in a variety of sizes and level of portability. So that's a derivative. You know, can you make it bigger, smaller? Can you add a camera? Can you give it a little bit more music? And then Coke is your example of a derivative. Really, what are the differences between the different Cokes? But they've tweaked the sugar, they've tweaked the sweetener. It might be slightly more lemony, slightly less lemony, and you get the derivatives. Which one do you think makes the most money? If you really want to get rich, which one should you be? Which space should you be in? Incremental. One vote for incremental. Any other thoughts? Derivatives, second. Breakthrough. Well, and someone will have to choose platform, but okay. So we've covered them all. Well, if anybody studied economics, in terms of usually kind of returns are linked also to risk. So your riskiest proposition is breakthrough. So breakthrough will potentially, eventually, make the most money. But the sad thing is the person involved in that original breakthrough is usually not the person that makes the money. So the others go on. Coke does really well out of incremental. Apple does really well out of derivative. You find your niche, and they are all potentially lucrative. But if you're kind of going to balance risk and the return, probably platform is your best bet. If that kicks off, because it means as more people are successful, the more you get paid and the more your platform is successful. But those three are definitely a good sphere to be in. If you're in breakthrough, good luck. So these are kind of what you're aiming to be. You've got to have a solution for a real pain or pleasure, solve a big problem, make sure your market and your technology is ready, because you hear a lot about these people who have fantastic ideas but actually get to the market too early. And it's got to be priced and timed before a substitute, because if you've hit on a really good problem that's potentially lucrative, the chances are someone else is thinking about it as well. And this is what you need to do, kind of spot and make use of that opportunity. Here are some more ideas of businesses. Manchester University was mentioned a couple of times this morning. Ketso is one of them. Has anybody used Ketso here? It's used a lot in education now. That's a great example of one person. Wow. Good. Perfect example of where you're leveraging your passions, your interests, and almost doing something that's also different. So that was originally developed for women's participation in community activities in Africa. And as they developed the materials, the drawings, they realized that it was a perfect tool for giving a voice to the voiceless, whether it was women or otherwise. But you didn't have to be literate, you didn't have to speak up. If you could draw, you could put something forward. They started to use it in education, and then it was developed as both an education and a management tool. It's to replace Post-its, but it's slightly more fiddly than Post-its. But if you want to have a record of what you are doing and really give that voice, because you can draw on it, you can write, then it's been a fantastic tool, and that's taking off. And then they followed their principles. So all the materials are biodegradable. The kits are made by Women's Cooperative in India. So you see, it's kind of now got both sides. What do you believe in, and bringing it all together. So, play to your strength, be your best self, do what you believe in, and try and move beyond the language. If it's called entrepreneurship or it's called something else, go for it. Think about it. What does it actually mean to you? How can you fit into it? Step out of that comfort zone. Yes, the label doesn't fit, but we talked about labels. The world is full of labels. Break out of the labels. See what you can access. And figure out how you want to do it. There are people who follow recipes, and there are people who look in the cupboard and think, okay, I've got sardines, beans, and some dried mushrooms. What are we going to make today? So, oh, why did it go? Okay, yeah. So you need to figure out where you fit in that. And that mirrors the processes in entrepreneurship as well. There are people who will do their research and plan, follow the recipe, and there are others that will jump head first. You'll have two schools of thought that will try and push you one way or the other. Find your groove. What works for you? Lean startup, particularly in the computer science sphere, is very much the flavor of the month, and it has a lot of merits. And that pretty much says, start early, get out there, interact with your customers. If you're going to fail, fail fast, because you don't want to drag the pain for everybody involved. But also it means you get your customers using your products. And that's where some of the quotes come in. If you're not ashamed of your first product, you've probably waited too long to launch it. But you do look back at your first and second generation products and think, God, what were we thinking? But get them out there, get your customers using them. On the other side, if you're in biotech, you probably do need to do your research and follow the steps and plan, because you're not going to jump in head first and kill somebody. Not a good idea. So, this is what you're essentially trying to do. We all have ideas, you have ideas. The middle bit is validating it. You're not really going to go anywhere until you think you've actually got something. But the proof in the pudding is really in the implementation. How are you actually going to do it? How are you going to make it work? Who with? Are you going to do it on your own? And again, one other myth to pop here is that whole thing of the lone entrepreneur. And that's part of what doesn't appeal to women. Going, I don't want to be the lone entrepreneur. I'm not heroic. I'm not about to save the world single-handedly. But actually, the best businesses are made up of teams. Back to playing to your strengths and others' strengths. But then it becomes also collaborative. So you are not alone. You don't have to do it alone. There are people work in teams. You have support within your organizations. A lot of businesses are supporting entrepreneurial and intrapreneurial, so kind of entrepreneurial behavior within the business. Universities have programs. The government has programs. Yeah. Google women in STEM and you'll find lots of resources to support women entrepreneurs. You'll find resources, less but still there. Talk to me if you want to know more, but you definitely are not alone. One of the things that we're doing, and I kind of want to point to the importance of education, is we run a program called Enterprise-Wise at Cambridge. And sorry, Carrie, but it is a women-only program. I'm originally from Egypt. And anything that says segregate men and women, I don't take very well. And so I had a very hard time because I came up with this concept and I thought, but I don't want to segregate. But there was a lot of literature and pointers that were actually saying that women, outperformed and better performed in a women-only environment for a certain amount of time. That was the evidence coming out of the women's colleges in the US. There was a program called MEETS at Cambridge for mid-career women that again was only women and that had impact indicators that were better than anything else I'd seen in an education environment. And so we said, okay, we're going to give this Enterprise-Wise a try, and we're going to do some research around it. And one of the things that we found was that women came to Enterprise-Wise that would not otherwise even think of approaching our portfolio of training. So at Cambridge, we have a full portfolio on entrepreneurship, training, education that goes everything from the individual to growth clubs. But the women that came to Enterprise-Wise had never looked into or been involved in any of our programs. But back to language, they'd seen posters that said, for women in STEM, and there was this stuff about enterprising and entrepreneurship, and said, not sure it's for me, but you said that it was for women and STEM, so we're curious enough to come and find out. And we realized that actually a women-only program within a portfolio was actually like an open access program. It was that invitation that the women needed that says, you know what, this is for you. We are having that dialogue with you. Come and find out. And the other thing we then learned from the qualitative feedback was they said, well, we wanted to come and see it, but this program is predominantly for PhDs and postdocs. These were the best of the best at their science and their technology and engineering. We take a very broad view on STEM. And they said, we didn't want to make any kind of, literally, we didn't want to make a fool of ourselves in front of our male colleagues. So this appeared to be a closed, safe environment. So it ticks several boxes. Yeah, it's as irritating for me as everybody else that it's women only, but it serves its purpose. It's only 4 days. We have the discussions we don't want to have with the men around, and then they move on to within kind of the rest of the portfolio. And these are some of the stats. One of the things we found, remember back I said I'll pick up on confidence. One of the things we found that the women that come have the lowest confidence, that's the blue lines pointing down. The line in the middle is the average of the database of about 3,000 students that we have from across Europe. And our women were the lowest that we had in that database. And within 4 days, their indicators go up to the red lines. The different elements are different elements of confidence. So how confident are they around creativity, sales and finance, team working, even their technical ability within a commercial sense. So it isn't rocket science, but you've got to find it in yourself to truly believe, I can do it. And with that, I will leave you to it. So find your way. You can do it. There is support. You're not alone. And enjoy. It's fun, it's impactful, and it really makes a difference in people's lives. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Shima. I think it's a really nice thing to see, the difference in going for a career with a company and taking ideas and developing them yourselves. I see a lot in research because that's generally what you do when you're working in a PhD. You've got this idea that's your own or part of a group and you're very much singular focused, and there is all that evaluating about what am I doing, what's the end goal, how am I going to test this work, and you're constantly thinking about that and constantly having ideas, sometimes at 3 in the morning going, I should have done that, and it's one of those difficult things, and you can feel very unsupported. So I think it's really important to highlight that it's not a lone career to do that. Does anybody have any questions about entrepreneurship or anything up here?
Sorry, I will stop asking questions eventually. So you've talked a lot about doing studies kind of surrounding University of Cambridge, and it seems to be very university-based. I was wondering if you've looked into entrepreneurships that started outside, as we've got an industry where there's a lot of people who haven't gone to university or have various backgrounds.
I haven't personally. Most of what I'm focusing on is actually kind of getting the value out of people who are so educated, because it started off saying, okay, there's all this talk around how much we're not getting girls into STEM subjects at school, and then they don't take them up at university. But the fact was, we get them, they graduate with PhDs, some of them even do postdocs, and then we lose them. So my focus has been interesting, going, you've come all this way, and a bit in the audience as well. You've done the education piece. How do you then do it? And a lot of the women that come to me say, what I can see is I don't like life in the lab, I don't like life in big business lab, or I don't want to code. And you think, well, but there's so much more to being in STEM and how you can leverage it around technology management, startup, joining a startup, technology, policy, going kind of more customer-focused within the corporate. So we're mostly in that sphere of how do you leverage and stay in science, but having a lot more options. And really, the central message, I mean, it's not a strapline, it is doing it your way. Because being enterprising is about deciding what it is you want to do and doing it that way, irrespective of what people say. Not because you're not a woman. No, you can't do it that way. That's the way it's always been done. You kind of go, no, I'm going to figure out how I'm going to do it within different contexts.
Just 2 seconds while we come round to you.
Good afternoon. My name's Donald. I want to find out, why are dyslexics the most successful business people?
Sorry, who are the most successful people?
Dyslexics.
Oh, dyslexics. Ah. I have an opinion rather than it terribly be founded on fact. But one of the things is that dyslexics have a really hard time at school. And they end up developing these entrepreneurial personalities, being used to doing things differently, finding their ways. And then when they go out, it's yet again difficult to get employed. The grades might not be up to scratch, or they might find out. And so there's a lot that get pushed into it. But whether by nature or nurture, there's really a link between entrepreneurial personalities and behaviors and being dyslexic.
Why are the most successful people? You look at Richard Branson, Tom Cruise, name a few, Einstein, genius, these type of people. Why are they so connected with dyslexia?
I don't know, maybe it's about being different, but they're used to being different and they find their ways. But yeah, I think the problem is that we grow up thinking that everyone's got to fit in the box, and actually the people who don't fit in the box are the ones that do fantastic things. But why dyslexia in particular? And I don't know whether there is generally a direct link with dyslexia. I know that around Cambridge we have a lot with other social disorders as well, but not as well, that's a learning disability. We have social disorders. And yeah, there are definitely links with being different. And I know one of the things that is based on research, somebody did a large-scale study looking at the household survey since the 1960s. And they found that the most successful entrepreneurs were the B and C students and not the A students. See? And therefore, because the A students were actually very good at taking exams, whereas the other ones were managing their time, and maybe their strengths were somewhere else. But it's all about the education system rather than the ability of the person. I have a 7-year-old, and I'm in the constant frustration on how the school looks at things, positions things, what they assess him on. So as far as the school is concerned, I have an average to weak child on everything, really, as far as they're concerned. And yet you look at him, and when you meet him, and you go, there's nothing average about him. He's very entrepreneurial. And we've had this discussion with my husband. I went, you know what, I think we're going to have to let go of this flogging system with the school, because as far as the school is going to be concerned, he's a B student all the way. And we were told it's unlikely to change. I said, that's how they view him, let it be. He's 7, and he's already on his 3rd business idea. And they tell me he's average, you know, below average.